Hello everyone, this is Michael. ASMR. Air tracing. Comedians. Those are a few of my favourite things. Comedians, I was thinking about this and I could think of quite a few comedians to do, so I might even have to do a couple, or maybe even 3 different comedians tracing videos to cover all the comedians that I like. But who knows? I was thinking, if I'm going to spread them out, should I include just a few of my favourites amongst the comedians I like? But I thought, now I'll include as many of my favourites as I can in this first video and see who's left for any future comedians videos. You don't give a shit, you want the air tracing, I got you, let's do it. As this goes along, I think I might, as well as the regular tracing, include a bit of the old Sean. A bit of the Sean pen. I'll try some different tracing. Always got to keep it different, keep it fresh. But for now, who should we start with? I'll start with my favourite comedian. I think he's the best comedian in the world today. Bill Burr. You may have heard of him. If you are a stand-up comedian fan, you definitely have heard of him. Fucking funniest man alive. Grumpy old man to the extreme. Right up my street. Right up my street of ranting comedy. So perceptive. Views, analyzes things so fucking well. From his days on the Opie and Anthony show, still worth listening to, by the way, the radio. They're on YouTube. He's hilarious. He gets so much right. I don't agree with everything, but I don't agree with anyone about everything. He's fantastic. My second favourite, it would have been my favourite through most of my life. My second favourite was my favourite. Bill Burr's my favourite these days. However, Connolly. What is to say about young William? Fantastically funny comedian, Billy Connolly. Turn of phrase, storytelling, very, very funny. I think he's getting towards the end of his life now, slowing down, not quite as edgy or as funny as he used to be, but to be expected. Suffers from Parkinson's now, but fucking sensational comedian. Sensational. Speaking of not long to go, here's someone who unfortunately has already expired. Robin Williams. We all know about Robin Williams. Comedic genius. His material was excellent, but I think he was someone whose his delivery was the main thing. His fun was better than his funny, if that makes sense. Very talented, brilliant actor, Robin Williams. Oh God, there are so many comedians when you think about it. I haven't got any written down. You can just think of so many. Mainly men, let's be honest. Generally funnier. Is that really controversial? Maybe these days it is. But yeah, with confidence, aggression, lack of being offended. is more conducive to adult comedy. So there are going to be more men on the list. Okay, so here we go. Now, Eddie Murphy hasn't done much comedy for a few years, you say. I agree. Does shitty kids films these days. I agree. But fuck, two of the greatest comedy specials of all time came from Eddie Murphy, Delirious and Raw. If you haven't seen them, watch them. You might be offended. Hope you are. They're fucking hilarious. Delivery, content, sensational stand-up performances, Delirious and Raw. On the vein of comedians like Eddie Murphy, Richard Pryor, a little before my time in terms of the comedians that I really loved, but from what I've seen, very funny man, very witty man, probably the best at being self-deprecating, fantastic self-deprecating humour without making it some forced humility thing. He just saw the shit in his life and he went for it 100%. Very influential comedian. Wouldn't have had Eddie Murphy if we hadn't had Richard Pryor. Very, very funny man. And I suppose I'll continue with the theme. So you have Richard Pryor, then you had Eddie Murphy, then you had Chris Rock. Wow. Voice. So much in the voice. But that's not fair because his content again was amazing. Very funny man. Just his specials. Really, really incredibly funny. What can you say about Chris Rock? Just continuation from Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy, obviously influenced by them both. And that sort of black comedian scene. But with his own material, it's unfair to just put them together. They stand alone and should stand the test of time for great insight, self-deprecating but really pinpointing things well, making societal points but always knowing that the comedy needs to come first, which will always be the point with stand-up comedy. Some now don't seem to get that the comedy must come first. You must be funny first, and those men definitely saw that. And I suppose the last in that little list, who's had some controversy recently because of some old tweets, that's fucking retarded. Kevin Hart. Probably the weakest of the content out of the four, but his delivery is exceptional. Very naturally funny man. Whenever you see him just post something on Instagram or whatever, he's always funny. He's got a funny voice, funny delivery, funny stature. Kevin Hart, clearly a good guy as well. This is the problem with just delving into tweets or things people have said. His main problem, he shouldn't have apologised. If you apologise, people think, aha, I can go after more people like that. It's not good. You don't apologise for that kind of thing. You stick to your guns. You say, well, I'm not a bad person. If you're going to be looking into everything about some individuals, then maybe you're not the greatest person in the world. Kevin Hart, fantastic delivery, fantastically fun guy, and again influenced by the three that I mentioned. Now slightly different to them, slightly. English. You might know him from, is it Mouse Hunt, the movie? I like Mouse Hunt. Lee Evans. Some of his specials, he got better as he went along. Some of his earlier ones, he relied too much on his manic persona stuff, but his content's fantastic. You just listen to his jokes, pretty quick fire with some jokes, but you know, his energy is only matched by how funny he is, and he's a very funny guy, Lee Evans. Yeah, you can see he talks about how, you know, he suffers from nerves and everything. And I don't think he's bullshitting with that. You can see that with how much he sweats. It's not just effort on stage. He's clearly nervous, and he's probably got one or two issues. But most comedians seem to have issues, so it's part of what makes them funny. Humor is, as they say, sort of closely related to tragedy. If you're finding humor in something, you're finding an angle on real life. Yeah, finding an angle on normal life, normal events, normal people. And so it's no wonder that comedians generally seem to be a bit weird, a bit fucked up. I think Lee falls into that category. Very funny guy. Speaking of fucked up. Jim Norton. Hopefully you've heard of Jim Norton. If not, Opie and Anthony third mic. Now he's got a radio gig with Sam Roberts. Fuck all that. Stand up alone. Sensational. Very funny. Again, he's just getting better as he's getting older. In terms of his stand up, I think his radio career, they saw the best years with the O&A show, but well, definitely did. He needs to get with Anthony Cumia, who I could have put on this list, but he's never done stand-up. One of the funniest men of all time, Anthony Cumia. Another nutcase, but incredibly funny and intelligent. And his partner in crime, really, Jim Norton. Watch his recent specials, Mouthful of Shame and things like that. Just such a funny guy. He bears everything about himself, about self-deprecating. Yeah, if you can think of something weird, Jim Norton's probably done it. And he talks about it. And there's no wonder that like he said that he was inspired by Richard Pryor. I'm not surprised with their equal level of self-deprecating humor. No one does self-deprecating better than Richard Pryor and Jim Norton. Right, what else do we have? Oh God, how do you spell it? A slight change in gear. An English comedian, probably not known in America. More family friendly. Not sure about the spelling, bear with me. McIntyre, the posh English comedian. He's got a show on BBC One now, some funny segments and things. Very different to the adult comedians, and generally what I prefer, the adult blue comedians, but he's funny. He's a funny guy. He gets a lot of stick from some in the comedy circuit, that kind of stuff. It's because of how well he does. He's a funny guy. He's different. He's a bit cheesy, but I think he knows it. He knows what he is. It's maybe just a bit of a shame that some of the other equally talented don't do as well, because maybe they're not as family friendly as he is. That's probably what they're pissed off about, which I would understand and agree with. But at the same time, you can't go against him just because he's successful. He's successful because he's very funny. Alright, there's the family market, and that's an easier crowd to go into. Clean comics, it's generally a bit easier to do. You know, some would argue that it's harder. I don't think so, because you can just poke fun at everyday life, and in just a fairly simplistic way, which, you know, there's a lot to poke fun at really, and he does it, but he does it very, very well. As some dark comedy guys can maybe rely on swearing a bit too fucking much, which is overrated by the way, because most of them don't. But there's potential that you could. He doesn't just rely on his fun delivery or his middle class laugh at ability, if you like. What he does observe things with observational comedy these days very well, and that's evident. He's a funny man. Whatever your tastes, if you just view it with an open mind, view these family-friendly comedians, he's a funny man. Now, Scottish comedian, slightly different style to Michael McIntyre. Frankie Boyle. Yeah, what do you say about Frank? Again, you might not have heard of him if you're not from Britain. You'll be shocked. Pretty dark, Frankie Boyle, which is great. I'm not a huge fan of his politics. I think it's that kind of studenty type where they think they're edgier than they are. But there's no doubt that he's edgy. It's just he also thinks the stuff that some of the things that he says for effect, and it's not as funny. He can use it as a bit of a crutch, a bit of an easy way to get the laugh from Frankie Boyle. But it doesn't take too much away from when he is actually funny, which is often. And I get the feeling he's probably not the funniest when he's not on stage. He seems to be pretty tied to his script, you know, his routine. But it's very funny. It's very funny. Pen time. Now, what should we pin? What comedians have we got left to pin? Oh my god, let's think. Focus. God, this lighting from my old rosy cheeks and the old blackheads. It's beautiful. Yeah, as I just stall for time here. I can think of a couple, think of a few. I'm just thinking, are they big enough to do? No, I'll do another English one. Which way should I do it? Should I hold it near or far away? I'll do it. Frank Skinner doesn't seem to do stand-up much these days, but when he did, he was funny. From Birmingham, funny working class style of humour. He's a little more middle class these days. That's probably why he doesn't do as much. But again, just a funny turn of phrase, some funny earthy comedy, and that's pretty much Frank. Alright, here we go. English. Why am I giving so many clues? Ricky Gervais. You might have heard of Ricky. Very funny all-around guy, into his activist stuff these days, but as if it's a bad thing. Again, I don't always agree with him, but funny guy, best awards show host I've ever seen. They need that. They need their heads to be just shrunken a touch, and Ricky is the best man for the job. Hilarious stand-up as well. Okay, another English. Bill Bailey, talented musician, but plays it down. Again, a little bit softer than most who I've mentioned, but funny guy, witty. When you're in the right mood for that kind of thing, he's up there. Probably somewhat underrated, Bill Bailey. So yeah. Now you've definitely heard of this next one. A controversial inclusion. You already know. Louis C.K., the masturbator extraordinaire. Whatever your views of Louis C.K., he's clearly a fucking weirdo. He's very, very funny. Again, another one on the Opie and Anthony radio show for plenty of years. Extremely funny guy. Self-deprecating as well. He knows he's weird. You can tell. He's lost a lot of money over what's happened. As for as weird as he is, I think people should go with him now and appreciate how funny he is. It's my personal view. You might disagree. That's fine. What he did, as weird as it was, is not in the same league as a Weinstein or a Spacey. You know, not for me. Not great. I think he's paid the price, but he's one of the funniest men in the world now. It's time to laugh with him again. And the last of, well, I've got two more Opie and Anthony show guests. I love that fucking radio show. Yeah. Patrice O'Neal. You might not have heard of him, which is a big shame. He was a big man, big personality, died young, 40, 41, diabetes, but man, again, one of the greats, Patrice O'Neal. Talk about funny with your routine or off it, both. And he was just getting better. His last special before he died was one of the best stand-up comedy routines I've ever seen. Extremely funny, always provocative, strong with his opinions, which I loved, never apologetic, you know. This is the sort of guy who you might not agree with, but you have to respect. You had to respect so much of what he said, and I actually agreed with plenty of the stuff that he said, but even if you didn't, what a tour de force. He would analyse things so well, and he was influential to me in terms of analysing things and finding your own way with your analysis, not being led by others and looking for something different that other people don't spot. He was one of the greats at that. Patrice O'Neal, one of the best. Another you might not have heard of, Rich Voss, also on the O&A show, often the butt of many jokes, but when all is said and done, and as they even said on the show, a very, very funny man, a witty man, not the brightest guy in the world, but he's got street smarts and he knows himself, and he's very funny, has his stuff with his comic wife, Bonnie McFarlane, who's also funny, not quite funny enough to be traced, but she's funny. Rich Voss on that fucking O&A show, always funny, always funny. let's finish with an English one. Finish with an English comedian who will be increasingly known in America, I'm sure. Jimmy Carr. Now, where do you start with Jimmy Carr? Intelligent, roasts fantastically, abuses fantastically, is aware of himself, funny often on the stage as a presenter. He's got the lot. Jimmy Carr. He's just, I think he's just getting better. He's on Netflix now, presenting a show, but he's stand-up. Watch his stand-up. So, you know, so many jokes, plenty of jokes, very funny. Psycho the rapist, psychotherapist. It's very, very funny. Jimmy Carr finishes my hair tracing with of comedians. Hope you enjoyed the pen version. I do a whole video of that, who knows. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed the tracing. Probably one of my favorite video types to do, tracing. Hope you enjoyed it too. Good night, folks.